And now I'd love to invite up here Peter Koechley, co-CEO of Upworthy, who is going to chat with me about driving engagement through virtual channels and viral campaigns. And even reading a phrase like virtual channels feels old to me, so.
It's cyberspace.
Let's start there,
It's changing everything.
So I'm going to hazard a guess and say not everyone in here knows what Upworthy is, never mind has actually engaged with it. Is that true-ish? Yeah. So why don't we start there, Peter? Tell us what Upworthy is.
So Upworthy is a mission-driven media company. We started it 4 years ago with the mission of drawing massive amounts of attention to the most important topics in the world. We saw social media totally transforming how people were getting their news, how they were getting their information, how they were spending their time. And unlike the era of newspapers and broadcast news, where an editor could decide what was important and actually push that to the top of the agenda or the top of the newscast, on social media, things only thrive when people actually engage with them. So we said, if we want people to care about climate change, if we want them to care about income inequality, if we want them to care about cooking fires, we need those stories to be as good and as engaging and as addictive and as shareable as the entire rest of the internet. So we started a company to kind of try to tackle that problem, to figure out what really works in a story that you see on your mobile phone, that's in a video that you might want to share with somebody. It's been a crazy 4 years. We have been called the fastest growing media company of all time. We drove 300 million video views last month. We're able to draw attention.
Say that number again.
300 million video views last month, all on videos that are about making the world better, either getting people to care about issues more deeply, getting them to care about other people and sort of building empathy between communities, getting people to just get a little closer to the aspirational version of themselves and a little farther away from the kind of lazy natural state that all of us sort of naturally can revert to.
So that's awesome, but I feel like I have to channel my mom here a little bit and say, okay, I get watching a video is hard to get people to do, but how does that actually translate into impact?
So it's a great question. So we think a lot about impact, and obviously we've talked about social impact all day. Before Upworthy, my co-founder Eli Pariser and I were at a big advocacy organization called MoveOn.org, and we were doing get out the vote, call parties, getting people to call congressmen, try to get particular bills through the Senate. We're really focused on that last mile, or even the last few feet in impact on a national legislative scene. And we saw again and again that when the stage had been set for a big conversation, when people were excited about an issue, when it was something that people were activated and energized on, it was really easy to organize. And when it was an obscure issue or when it was something that hadn't gotten national exposure, it was really hard to organize. So when we founded Upworthy, we focused on social impact that was designed specifically to change hearts and minds of people at scale, rather than trying to drive donations, drive signups, drive kind of direct response. We think all that work is great, and a lot of people are doing really good work there. But we decided to say, some stories actually change forever how you think about an issue. Some stories take something from a totally unknown thing into something that is incredibly important to you in your life. We want to figure out what those stories are, how to tell them, how to create them, and how to distribute them. So when we think about impact, we think about actually changing what people know, actually changing what people care about, and changing people's intent to take action. Like, I want to learn more about this, I want to do more about this.
So you're changing people fundamentally, and that drives their action, in theory, for the rest of their lives.
That's the hope. We've tested it 2 months out. We have not tested it for the end of their lives.
And what have you found 2 months out?
We got this Gates Foundation grant to figure out just the actual social science around how to measure behavior shift, how to measure perception shift, and then on a number of campaigns on childhood marriage, on a whole bunch of global health and poverty issues, we saw not only do the right type of stories change how people think about them, but those effects were about 80 or 85% as strong 2 months later. So you see a single video, and then 2 months later, you actually are still thinking about childhood marriage more than you were before seeing that. And we tested with control groups, and it was all very rigorous and fun. It was our social scientist on staff tried to get me to not run the test because he was so worried that it was going to reveal that, like, oh, it's just a video and you watch it and then it goes away. And so we were really delighted when it was actually a good
Rigor
result.
can be good.
Yeah.
It can be very good.
It's dangerous but good.
But we have to ask the hard question then, which is how do you actually identify the video that's going to make that change? How do you find that content in this content-rich environment we live in now?
Yeah. No, this environment we live in now it's kind of a truism, but it really is crazy how the war for attention, the war for every second of every one of our days is so brutal and intensifying so quickly. We think that the answer is sort of in the combination of art and science. We really believe in human creativity and subjectivity as an incredibly important part. We've hired really great editors and video producers to do that. And then we've given them a whole technology platform that we've built to optimize and evaluate stories so that you can make your stories stronger, testing them with real people and see what actually works and what doesn't work. So we think it's not human versus machine, but it's the kind of Tony Stark Iron Man suit or something that actually is the answer on how to craft those stories, how to find those stories.
And a lot of it is relatability, right? I love how much comics has come up today in the context of our
comics
summit.
do really great on Upworthy.
But to that point, what else is relatable in that way? When we think about what makes a video go viral, and that's almost a silly question even as I say it, are there certain signposts that we can look for or certain signals that you look for as you think about finding that video that's going to make that shift, that's going to turn into the next campaign that we're all talking about next year?
So we think about two main things. One is getting people to care very quickly. The question of, like, why should I care about this? Why should I watch more than 3 seconds of this? And then ending each video or each story with a very clear argument for why I should share it. The social sharing, this is, like, some of this is very obvious, and yet when you dig into it, it's quite profound. Social sharing leads to a very different type of story creation than a world where you just want people to stare at the screen and not be able to look away. The idea of telling a story that leaves somebody with a clear, active emotion, leaves somebody feeling like there's a little hope in the world, even if it's a really hard topic, just not leaving people feeling like depressed and confused and like hopeless. Even if you just do that, your stories will perform much better. And it's a bit of a balance because, as we all know, for people that work in the space or in the media around the space of all these issues, like, it's really hard stuff. And it's not like there's a sunny, happy, sunshine story about each one of these issues. We just think it doesn't do a lot of good to just paint the purely negative, dispiriting, disempowering story. So I think it's actually useful to do, like, the people that do reporting that ends up with stories like that, it is a useful part of the ecosystem, but it's not the best way to get 100 million people to know about something or care about it. You have to, like, give them something meaty and emotional and real, and then end with something that makes them feel like maybe something positive could come of this.
And it could change, and they could have an impact on that potentially. And it sort of speaks to what David DeMauro said at the opening of the summit, which is that we need to fight that cynicism, which you guys, I remember when Upworthy first came out, even very millennial journalists were sort of like, you're going to build a whole media site around happy stuff? Like, how is that going to work? That's not real news.
Yeah.
And yet you've managed to do that. So I wonder, from the 4 years on perch of success, we'll call it that, what are the things that we don't understand yet or are getting wrong in the media environment? Because we have in here a number of venerated media companies and executives and folks who know a lot about PR and media in general. And I think we'd all want to know, what are the lessons from what you all have learned that could help us to shift our approach?
So one key learning is that it just remains very, very hard. And the stuff you think is hard is hard. So it is actually very difficult to get people to care about climate change because figuring out the right angle that says there is a hopeful path forward, it's just very hard because it's a very, like, there aren't that many positive answers to that. There are some, and we found a lot of success looking at like municipalities taking a step in the right direction, or small groups, or like battling the coal industry here or there. Like, there are success stories you can tell, and there are small personal change stories you can tell. There are ways to get into the issue, but I think that there are some things that the world of social media is more willing, important topics that are easier to talk about. There's been great progress on LGBT issues. There's been great progress on gender discrimination, though obviously there's a huge amount still to go. But there's still a set of issues that we've had some success cracking, but it's not like we can just make malaria go viral tomorrow, go socially viral.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hashtag punning.
Yeah.
So that being said, because this work is really hard, what's the upshot for you personally? What's a moment you can point to or share with us that makes you feel like this is why I do this work?
Well, I have a video.
Ooh. Came prepared.
Good lead in. I mean, I think what we've learned, and again, this sounds somewhat obvious, but turns out to be quite effective, is nobody wants to sit down and watch a video about a really hard topic. Even people in this room, even people that work in it, we are all like innately kind of lazy and self-focused and distracted and busy and late for the next thing already. And overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so I think that we start from a real belief that humans are both better deeply than people give them credit for, and worse than they get credit for. And I think like your aspirational version of yourself is better, and your active in this moment version is kind of even worse than you think. And so we try to tell stories that are actually, when you start watching it, you don't know that it's necessarily a story about some difficult issue. And so we start very broad. We look for the interesting. We treat it like entertainment. And then we want to leave you with a payload of substance, so you feel at the end of it like, I actually got something out of that. I actually, will think a little differently about something. And now I've way overbuilt up this video. I should have showed the video first and then talk theory after. But
I grew up in a Catholic.
Here it is.
A Catholic. I was there at one time in my life. I remember, and this is something that I'm not so proud of, but I remember seeing Muslims and saying something negative about them in front of their face. So I know, I understand that it's a mix of arrogance and lack of knowledge.
A lot of people fear what they don't know. So if somebody was to talk to me over the phone, they wouldn't have known that I'm a Muslim because they don't know what I look like. And the fact that they're getting to know me without that visual aspect to it allows them to connect with me. When I wear a headscarf, I encourage others to come up to me. I love that because I know that they are initiating that dialogue, and I'm here to answer any questions. Mariana and I, we both work in the fashion industry, and with the things that are arising around the world, and we started to hear from other Muslim women that they started to become afraid of who they were and what they wore, and we thought that it was really important to empower these women in other ways that allows them to stay themselves. And we started our self-defense courses.
Send my hands forward, and as always, I don't understand.
I think it's really important to understand that the narrative here isn't that Muslim women are victims and they're weak and they need to learn these things, or, you know what I mean, they're going to be attacked. No, it's actually the opposite. It's to become more empowered, to have a circle and a network of women who support each other.
There's something else that the self-defense class gives you, and that is the fact that how do you carry yourself about in public that changes you from looking like a victim to looking like somebody who's empowered and that you're not going to be messed with. That's the key.
I do it like
If I want people to connect with me, then find the things that we relate us, you know? It's not just by my image. I mean, yeah, I do fashion, but with fashion, I'm opening dialogue. So I'm trying to get you to understand that, yes, I am integrated into this society and I'm able to take the East and West and put that image in one place. And I think that when people are more open-minded about the way that others look or talk or, you know, anything, I think that we'll be able to have more understanding.
It's about that time that people start seeing like what Muslim women are really about. You know, it's time.
So Nadira, is this on? Nadira just said that she actually has taken that
I'm
self-defense class.
actually in that class that they were taping.
That's crazy.
The world is a common and uncommon and constant marvel, right?
Yeah. So what, I know we're close to end of time, but I'll just want to close with, that video is part of a larger thing that we're focused on this year. We sort of were deeply mission driven, and we try to look at the information environment and look at the media world and think like, what stories should people be paying attention to rather than what they are. And this year with thank you. No. Yeah. So, you know, we think that stories can actually break down barriers, and we think that the social science says that the number one way to break down a stereotype, the number one way to break down bigotry or bias or hatred is to actually have a relationship with somebody from that group. The second best way is to understand them through stories that you connect with on an emotional level. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to figure out interesting, surprising, real human stories of Muslims in America, of Mexican immigrants, of all of the groups that are being targeted and singled out and marginalized in the current political conversation. Tell the positive, real stories that stick with you and surprise you and are memorable, so that at a very large scale, we're able to take this moment, which is fairly scary on a bunch of levels, and use it as an opportunity to see the bias and the bigotry rise to the surface, and then actually knock it down with powerful storytelling. So.
Thank you, Peter Koechley.